All right, today we're going to talk about some of the biggest mistakes you can make in auction drafts. It's really easy to make mistakes in auction drafts. It comes at you fast. And if you're not prepared, you don't know what you're doing going into it, it can get rough. And Jeff and I have been doing this for 15 years now on auction drafts. And every single time we have a draft, Jeff, in 19 days from today, when that draft starts, we're going to be nervous. And so even us who've done it forever, prepared and all this going on, we're going to get nervous. It happens. So these kind of things can happen. So try to make sure they don't happen to you. I'll start my top one is one. I don't really think these are in order. These are just different mistakes. One is bidding up too high on players you don't actually want. Now, I'm not saying to not be in the bidding and move players up, because I actually have another point after this that ties into this. My point is, if there's a guy you don't really love, don't want, but there is always a price for everybody, right? That you would be okay with. Only bid to the price where, you'd think, oh, wow, I got to steal. Even if I don't love this guy, I got to steal. Do that point. Don't start trying to, go up too high because, this is going for too cheap. I can't let people get this for this cheap, because you know what? All of a sudden you might just be stuck with them. And that's happened. I've seen people do it. And I think you just don't want to do it. So just be cautious. If it's a guy you don't like, I don't mind bidding up a little bit, showing you're active, but don't go too high. Keep it at a level where it'd be a steal yet for you, or a very good value.
Yeah, I've seen people double down on that, and they try to bid someone up on a position they can't start two of. I've seen people end up with two tight ends, and now you're like, what do you trade one? So you don't want to put yourself in that position.
Yep. So, but this can go into the next one. So one thing I think is a mistake that people make is tipping their hand in auction drafts. What I mean by that is you're not involved with anything until you absolutely want the guy. You're not in any of the bidding until it's your guy you want, and then you just go nuts. And then everyone's probably like, oh, Jeff wants this guy. We're going to bid him up. But if you are, like we said before, bid on guys maybe you don't love, but you would get to a good value. So it shows you're active. You're active. You're out there. You've been involved. All of a sudden, if you just pop in out of nowhere, you're like, whoa, where'd he come from? We know he wants him. That's kind of how it feels. And I think you can that's when other people might bid you up on that, knowing you want it. Again, I'm a little skeptical of bidding up. It's scary, but other people will do it, and you can lose guys. It's happened to you. I know.
Oh, definitely. Usually because of you. It's never good when people know who, you shouldn't tip your hand because of the show.
Yeah,
out of our control.
It's a little worse for that. But
it is always great at the end when your buddy just yells, he wants him. And then it's like, you're like, oh no. And then, especially at the near the end too, when you're like, well, I still need a QB. It's the end of a tier. People aren't dumb. They will know that they can put a little more pressure on you, and you don't want to put yourself in that position.
But this next one might be my number one if I had a number one, and it probably would be. It's sitting on the sidelines at the beginning of the draft. And we've talked about this in other episodes when we talk about the tips and we talk about nomination strategy. It's all about getting in early, being aggressive early, not just sitting out there just like, these prices are going too high. Everyone's going too high. They are going to, I'm telling you right now, especially if you're new to auction drafts, the prices are going to go for too high. Like in your mind, you're going to go into this thinking you can get these deals. The draft's going to start and you're not going to get those deals. The prices are going to go for higher than you think. And all of a sudden, if you go in that way and they're going to go higher than you think, you're going to be like, I can't get that guy, can't get that guy, can't get that guy, because they were higher than what you valued them at. But clearly that means the value actually is higher. You're off on your prices. So don't just sit there and let that happen, because all of a sudden you get this mid-tier team with no stars. And honestly, at that point, you have to hit the jackpot in waivers or hope someone has a huge breakout to have a chance to win. And it doesn't happen a lot. Stars at the end of the day really do win for you. Stars are huge breakouts. And we can try to predict breakouts all day, but none of us know. None of us actually know. So just don't sit there. Get the guys early. I did that before. I looked back at one of our drafts, like one of the first ones we did in like 2010. And I got the 33rd guy off the board. Was the first guy I got. And I look back at that like, oh, that's terrible. I won that league. So I'm not going to say, but that was different. I had to get very lucky with some waivers. Yeah. I was extremely lucky with some waivers that year. And if I didn't get those couple waivers, like Peyton Hillis that big year and a couple other guys, right? And Alfred Morris, I think. if I didn't like hit the jackpot on a couple guys, it would have been bad news. So that's one thing. Sitting on the sidelines, it's just not the way to go. I mean, I don't know. Have you done that and just look at your team later and be like, oh, this sucks?
I think everyone that's done auction for multiple years has definitely done that. And I will say this, I have come into the drafts more prepared, and it's not necessarily maybe having like one team that I really, really want. I think the big one for me is understanding the tiers. I know we keep going back to it, but the tiers and knowing that I have to add cash to whatever I think that the price is going to be. And that is how I try to figure out my teams now. I will say, okay, I'm going to take that as his value. I'm going to add a little cash to it and throw him on my team, and I could afford to make this team right. I don't want to freak myself out. I want honest values for every single player, because too many people go in and been like, I'm going to get a deal on these 5 players and it's going to make the difference, and it will never work out that way.
No, in those situations, so one of my next points about talking about tiers is we will keep driving this point home, but to me, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is not knowing the tiers, not understanding the tiers, not understanding who is left in a tier at running back or wide receiver. And honestly, there can be times where you make those tiers and like, you should be looking, okay, this is my tier for players, but you should also understand maybe someone else probably has this other guy in the tier too. Like you just know what other people might think, but not knowing those tiers can crush you in drafts, because you all of a sudden won't know like who's left, and you're passing up other guys thinking, oh, I'll get somebody else. And when in reality, that was like the second to last guy in the tier. That last guy, enough other people are going to know it, and it's going to get bad. And that price is going to go for $20 more than the last guy went. Not knowing the tiers is just, it's a death sentence for you in these auction drafts. And then like my other thing is, you talked about having almost like you have a strategy, but you might have a couple strategies, right? A couple ways your team can go, right?
Easily, yeah.
Not having that is killer too. Like if you go into the draft with one idea, all right, this is my team, this is what I have to do, which is great to do. But if that's all you're trying to do, chances are you're not going to get the team you want. You have to be prepared to pivot from what your initial strategy is. So going into a draft with just one way of doing things, no, it's not going to work. Have your A plan. I like to do that. I like to have my A plan, then I have like my B plan, my other plan, like where I'll pivot off of that plan doesn't work. But that's why I say at the beginning is the mistake is sitting on the sidelines. That's why you go early and be aggressive early so you can get those plans in place and you can pivot to the next plan if you need to. But you need those things in auction drafts. Yeah. Sometimes you can get lucky and have a good draft. There's luck that I've seen people do it, luck their way into a really good draft. But if you're with some people that know what they're doing, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, and just because you get lucky on one player, good for you. Take that money, you can allocate it to another position or whatever. But it's even better if you get lucky early, because then you actually know where that money can go. It can go for another big time name or who knows, another breakout guy that you really, really want, you didn't think that you'd have a shot at. Yep. And the tier thing and having multiple plans is so important, and they go hand in hand, because if you look and say this year, people will have running backs, as an example, in different kinds of tiers. Me and Craig will say Christian McCaffrey is in a tier on his own. Yeah. But if I have 5 guys in tier 2 and I'm realizing it's coming to the end, I know that I put him in a tier for a reason, and I desperately want to get one of those guys. I'm willing to overpay a little bit in order to secure one of them, in order to make sure that one of these plans is going to happen. Yep. So you have to know that, because that is where jumping from I really wanted, Saquon Barkley or Jonathan Taylor or something, and now I don't have that, and now I have to go down to a Pacheco or something. It changes the dynamic, and maybe I actually don't want him. Like maybe that is a completely different type of thing, even though I think he deserves to be in that tier, but I don't want him. And it does. So you have to have your tiers. You have to be honest with who you want and what you're willing to pay for him.
It can get ugly if you don't have if you're not prepared for it and not have those things going on. Cause
it's very brutal.
It can get bad.
It really sucks when your team is full of guys where you're like, I paid, I mean, they're worth all that money, but I don't like my team. No, like no one wants to be in that position. So
just be prepared, and hopefully these mistakes won't happen to you. But that'll do it for this one. Talk to you guys next time.